Hi, this is the 14th video on this video series initiative on surviving IIM Ahmedabad, and the second one, which deals with the idea of placements and specifically the preparation for consulting interviews. And this one's about preparing for the consulting interview process comprehensively. In the previous video, I had mentioned this point number 3, where I'll talk about a lot of other things that goes into the process of becoming a consultant. And here I will just break those things down in some detail. So this one's going to be a long video, and as always, before you start, just have a sense of these pointers so you have a better idea of where I'm coming from, or you can look at the first video where I describe this in some detail. So jumping right in, and here again, I don't want to take anything away from the placement teams and the consulting clubs on campus that will talk about these things in much more detail, but I'm basically trying to fill in some of the gaps. The first thing I would say is start your prep early. And here I am at the loggerheads a lot of times with some of my peers who believe that sometimes on campus, the idea of placements kind of eclipses the idea of academics. And I quite agree with them. But our approach to addressing that is different. They feel that we should just talk about academics upfront, and I differ. And I say that if we try to hide the idea of placements, if we try to not talk about this, all people will do is still prepare, but in a darker situation wherein they might not have the best inputs and not the most verified inputs. So the best way to actually have people focus on academics is to reduce their stress level when it comes to placement. That's my position. And that's why I'm advising you to prep early. Be sure which you want to focus, which role you want to focus on. And here what I mean is that, are you preparing for 3 different sectors, let's say marketing, finance, consulting? And I understand BSchool is a lot about exploring. So I don't want you to focus, like pick one and be absolutely close to everything else. That's never the intent here. But what I'm trying to say is, somewhere in the process, figure out that at least these are the 2 that I want to focus on. And there is something which is completely off the table because it does not align with my background in any manner or anything at all. And I don't even care for that, let's say, job right now. I think sometimes we try to buy too much safety, which doesn't work. So whenever you just try to actively seek this clarity and at least keep avoiding things, keep removing things from the table. On the contrary, I would also say that sometimes a lot of people come with this very narrow vision that they only want to do consulting without having a proper understanding of what the consulting life is all about. I remember when I was in my second year, I asked this junior that kya karna hai, and she said consulting, and I was like, do you have a clear sense of what consultants do, what their life looks like, what are the challenges? And she said no. I was like, pakka consulting karna hai? And she said yes. And I could not reconcile with that the person was choosing something without knowing the pitfalls of that. So I would say that when I say start your prep early and avoid multiple options, what I'm trying to say is reach out to people. You would probably get mentors, you would know people, and otherwise LinkedIn is such a great platform to make meaningful professional connects. Reach out to people, tell them that you're an incoming BSchool student, you want to understand this space a little more. And I'm sure out of the many people that you message, some will get back to you and some will give you a higher amount of clarity. And I'll go back to this. If you leave this to if you leave this decision or this clarity to a much later date, then it will eclipse the amount of the stress that comes with it, will eclipse the amount of time you can give to some of the other activities. And typically, people who just prepare for multiple sectors from a position of, buying excessive safety, I personally do not agree with their approach. More often than not, like a few days before placements, they will end up picking one track. And then all the effort they have put in, which again, I would emphasize that, as I've done in previous videos, that comes at the expense of the amount of time we give for other activities. That's just simply not worth it. So get your inputs in place. And let's say after doing all of that and having an open mind, you feel that consulting right now seems a little more likely. So don't be completely boxed in, but let's say it's something which is more likely. Then just collate the resources, reach out to relevant seniors in a timely fashion. And I'll give you some of the resources here. The beginning part of the consulting prep can be done very individualistically. And that's why at least the people who take my advice before joining campus, who did so last year when I was joining my second year and they were joining the first year, and people who reached out to me now also, I'm saying just at least get all the things you can do individually in place, and then reach out to people if you have to, if you want to practice one-on-one cases. So that's that. uh, I've already mentioned that it helps balance placement preparation and academics, and how the opinions differ on this front. Second would be FaceTime. So I've mentioned multiple times that, reach out to people, reach out to people, reach out to people. That's very informally known as FaceTime. So whether you're doing this online or whether you do it on campus, my advice is more specifically for doing this on campus. Reaching out to seniors for advice is a great chance to know more people. But as with everything else, it's a time sponge. It comes at an expense. And your seniors, at least again, going back to Ahmedabad context, will have more free time typically than you have as a first year student. So they might go on and keep you for a couple of hours of time that you might not have given your assignment priorities. So be a little careful of managing your time on that front. Be choosy and do not fall into the FOMO trap. This I've already mentioned in some detail in the previous video. Figure out the 7-8 people that, and here is the word, like relevant seniors that I mentioned in the previous point. Figure out the few people you want to reach out to and reach out to them. Someone reaching out to 25 seniors, I don't think that makes any sense at all. Getting few inputs, let's say if you're interested in consulting, reaching out to 2-3 seniors from each of the firms, trying to understand their internship experiences, trying to understand what are the challenges they went through, trying to understand how they went about preparing. I think that's more than enough. So don't get into the FOMO trap that I want to talk to that person also, that person also. And stick with the people that you feel from their background you can relate to more. That's the advice that will stick, rather than someone, let's say, who's more available and 20 people are going to that person, but whose advice will not resonate with you. And as with everything else, there's a diminishing marginal utility once you reach out to more people. This thing can really, and I cannot emphasize on this enough, can really suck up a lot of time. So be careful. So those are two broad points. Then comes the point about case group. First thing is, do you need a case group always? I think the clear answer is no, you don't. And the the reason for saying that is this: case group is not a must to have; it's a good to have. And in the end, everyone ends up practicing with everyone else. So do not. And I've seen, like, while making a case group, and this is what I did also. Like, I started so early. I was like, oh, I need to block these set of people and make a case group with them, because they seem to be like very motivated. They are very excited about consulting and they are very sure. And I had perhaps one of the most amazing case groups. And very soon we stopped practicing regularly with each other, and we just started practicing randomly with a lot of people on campus. What case group gives you is an initial certainty. Some people do stick with the case group throughout, but the point of mentioning this is that do not freak out if you are not so early in making a case group. A lot of people will do that. That don't have a case group yet. A lot of case group get reshuffled when the shortlist comes, depending on who gets the shortlist and who doesn't get a shortlist. So you don't have to get to the bandwagon so quickly. And at the same time, some mistakes are committed when people are in such a hurry to form a case group. And what I would say is that these are few points to mention. One is accessible. People should be accessible, trusting, and non-competitive. My my case group, I mentioned, like, and this turned out to be a funny story that we often, not often, we sometimes think about and laugh. That While our case group was absolutely trusting and non-competitive within the group, accessibility was one concern. I had a very good friend in my case group who lived on the other side of the campus, and we had this constant struggle on where do we practice every day. And we ended up wasting far more time on that than that problem deserved. I would say that if you have someone, and I think the best case group, what is when you make it with the person living next door, because then even at 2 a.m. you don't have to plan like 6 hours ahead. If you see this person, you go to their room and you're like, khali baitha hai, chale case karte hain. That's the accessibility that would be great to have. So it's one thing to keep in mind. People should be trusting and non-competitive. I think that's fairly obvious, because this has to be a place where all the inputs that come in. So case group helps in some ways funneling the input that you get from the world, because everyone's having different sets of conversations. So it can be a place where you share everything you have heard and discuss and get to know the, let's say, true picture by triangulating the inputs that all of you know. The key approach to have is that, enough of us are going to be made that we don't have to compete with each other at all. The second thing is on a little bit on the ability front, and they're able to give honest and correct feedback, especially if it's brutal. Uh, this might seem not very clear right now, but just keep that in mind if you can. Sometimes there are some people who are too nice and who are very afraid of offending the other person, and those persons are great to have in your life, but in a case group you want someone who can give you the bitter medicine. So sometimes people's niceness eclipses their honesty. You might not like that very much in your study case group. It's not very helpful. And correct basically means that people who have done some basic amount of case prep to know what's the right input to give, because this can be lethal if you are with someone who has a false sense of what's a good way to solve a case. Then you will believe their feedback, and then few days down the line you'll have to unlearn everything you have learned and then relearn, which is a crazy process to have. So make sure that everyone in the case group, before you start practicing with each other, you've had a chance to attend a few sessions. If possible, look at my videos, and I'll talk about that more in the resources, and read at least one case book so you have a sense of what's the correct feedback. Then people should be as motivated as you. uh, I mean, if someone has consulting as a second or third, like I mentioned, people can have multiple preferences, and they are not willing to spend like more than 1 hour every day while you want to do 3 or 4 hours. That won't work. So I think this is something you should clarify very clearly upfront. Hey, how many hours are you willing to put in? And that way you can avoid a lot of struggle. And they should be empathetic and fun. Like I've mentioned in my previous video also, you have to be there for your friends, and your case group becomes in many ways your first point of contact there. Fun because it's not just a transaction ki yaar chalo case karte hain. It's so much more than that. So that's something to keep in mind, and that's something I think a lot of people forget, because they're looking for the best case solver. But if they're not empathetic, if, like I mentioned with the seniors in the previous video, if they don't have empathy, and if they're not fun to hang out with, then doing a case with them will feel like a chore, and then you won't be able to accelerate your preparation in any way. So don't strive for that famous guy on campus who's prepared for cases before in their DU background or IIT background. You're much better off with someone who is, let's say, working out on a lot of these factors, not just that they have done case prep before. And typically, the way the case group works, and I think I should have started with this, is you typically have three people who play this role of being, one is an interviewer, one is an interviewee, and one is an observer. The observer is required because the interviewer and interviewee get too involved in the case solving, sometimes to catch on the small parts. And the observer is also required to give feedback to the interviewer. Like I mentioned, not everyone can be a good interviewer. So the observer can help with that also, so that all three people who are involved in this process come out of the experience a little bit richer. Sometimes what people do is, after a few days, they cut out the observer and they just focus on two people. That's also completely fine, even to start with, if you are much more confident that each of you knows how to give feedback. You can make like a bigger group, but it typically does not work out, or simply splitters into like smaller groups of three or four. So I'll just again repeat, it's a good to have, but in the end, everyone practices with everyone. The second set of things I want to really discuss is how much should you even prepare? And first question is on the second point here, but the first thing I want to deal with is number of cases. This is a question, at least my second year, I was asked so often that I kind of lost count. How many cases should we do? I don't have an answer for that. I know people, like I was one of the people who did about 35 odd cases, and one of my closest friends did about 230 cases. It was a huge margin. I did less because if you've seen my background, I had done a lot of cases before I came on campus. I just wanted to do enough number of cases to get comfortable with cases all over again, be the interviewee more times. And a few of them I did because of FOMO, because everyone else was doing it. So I decided I would at least definitely do one case every day. The person who did 230 or anyone who's done like 100, 150, they are doing that at the expense of some other things. So do not get too competitive on the numbers. More cases does not always mean better quality of preparation. If you're doing like 100 profitability cases and all of them are pretty average, that's not really going to help. And I would rather do, let's say, situation 1A, someone has done 100 PNL cases and 5 market entry cases. Situation B, someone who has done 20 PNL and 10 market entry. I would rather be in the B position, that I have covered more cases, more types of cases than anything else. And I'll get to that point. But you will hear this being thrown around that that senior did so many cases, and telling you can absolutely do this with less number of cases. Sometimes the people who have that kind of advice are not that vocal. That's the problem. And people, it's, I've already discussed the point of opportunity cost, especially academics and social life are the ones that get crucified here. Second, if you do too many cases, there's a risk of becoming mechanistic, that you see a case and you just jump into a structure. Your creativity and dealing each problem on its own merit is something which is a really big differentiator when you look at case solving. It's not just all pure structuring. Good structuring is absolutely a must, but the cherry on the cake is how original you are in a thought process. What I have seen with many people is when they are solving too many cases, they do end up becoming mechanistic. So keep that in mind. And the third risk is developing hubris. If you have done 200 cases, and especially when people get competitive on numbers, that's that risk. So I'm not saying that's necessary that's going to happen, but I'm just asking you to be mindful that this can happen. And how many number of cases? So this is where I want you to bring in. So diversity in the preparation matrix. Diversity in the preparation matrix. Yeah. The first is of the interviewer and the interviewing style. So in the previous slide, we were discussing about case groups. I think one big reason to actually move out of your case group is also because sometimes you're able to, once you like practice 7, 8, 10 cases with someone, you can tell what their tell is. How do they react when they are more positively disposed? How do they react when they are more negatively disposed? And picking on that, you can change your case solving. That's not a luxury you will have in an interview where the person is an absolutely new guy or a new woman. So don't get too comfortable with someone, and that's why it helps to actually talk to different people, solve cases with different people. Second is of the type of cases covered and the various industries. Already with A and B, I've mentioned how I would actually prefer a wider coverage than anything else. This one cool framework that someone told me is that just make a table. On the y-axis, you can put up different types of industries, let's say. So retail, pharma, banking and financial services, and so on and so forth. And on the x-axis, you can put different types of cases. Guesstimate, profit and loss, market entry, and mainly these three. And let's say an unconventional case, something of that sort. And just have this matrix prepared before you start your preparation. and keep putting a tick mark, so that whenever you go and do new cases, through your cases itself, you get a wider industry coverage and a wider type of case coverage. By looking at your sheet, you will know that you're not just focusing on guesstimates or just profit and loss or just one kind of industry over and over again. So it's a good check to have. If you've covered like 3 or 4 types of cases for about 10 odd industries, so the number comes to about 40, 45, I think you're really set. So that largely covers the point I want to cover here. And then here, uh, I think then I want to focus on the resources for the case prep. And here I'm going to be unapologetically biased that do start with my YouTube channel. So basically, if you go back and just look at some of the other videos I've uploaded on this channel, you will find like 20 plus videos on case prep and very, very small things. It's my personal belief that it's one of the better resources that is out there because it's been prepared by it's a culmination, and I'm absolutely happy to say that I've picked up from all the experts that are out there, and then it's been trained or it's been refined through all the sessions I've had before and the inputs I've received from them. So, and it's very specific to the Indian context. So do look at my YouTube channel first. I think this should be the first step. So you have your basics in place. And as I mentioned, the basics is so important because you might have to give feedback to people and you don't want to go through the unlearning and relearning process. Then check out this casebook, Case Interview Cracked. It's available on Amazon. Of the few case books I have seen, I think hands down this is the best one. Just read the cases. You don't have to solve these cases with anyone. And I think going through the casebook, they complement what I'm going to talk about in my videos very well. So these two things put together, you would have a very good handle on case solving itself. Now, what really matters is actually starting preparing with other people. So what you can do is you can check out the Consult Club IIM Ahmedabad's LinkedIn page. And there, I mean, we set the page up last year in 2019. And we decided to put all the resources that we generate as a club in public domain. So the casebook, so it has casebook and newsletter. I think the casebook was uploaded somewhere September 2019, September or somewhere around that point of time. So you might have to scroll down a little bit. Just use those cases to practice with your friends. And there are about 3 newsletters, at least from the 2019-2020 academic year. Go over them. They will give you a deeper understanding of consulting as a profession. And just look at those with a critical eye, whether the experiences that are described, whether they match up with your interest level or not. So you have so many inputs in those newsletter that at least you can get a fairer understanding, which I was really urging you to have in the first slide of these 3-slide set. So just check that out. And as I mentioned, use this to practice other people. You can use some of the other BSchool casebooks also. So I've seen ISV, I've seen IIM Bangalore. Both of them are really good. I saw IIM Lucknow's YouTube channel, and that's also pretty good. So you can use those books also. Then Victor Cheng, who's like the godfather of case solving, has a set of YouTube videos. I frankly believe that they are for a much they're for a US audience largely, and they presuppose a lot of business understanding, which I think is a little difficult to deploy in the kind of environment that we have, because there the case solving typically you would have people giving like 6, 7, 8 interviews to get selected. Here we have like 1, 2, 3 interviews. So I think the focus is different. That's why I don't find it very prudent to go over the YouTube videos, especially if you have done all of the above steps. But he also has audio series Look Over My Shoulder, which try to get your hands on. It's very useful. It has 22 audio cases. So basically 8 cases, some of them done 1 to 4 times. And just going them over and over again. He keeps telling, so what he does is he either interviews other candidates or interviews himself. And he talks about what the candidate has done right or wrong in the last few minutes. And that's very instrumental. quantitative. What I have done in my videos also is that I had listened to all of his audios, used them in different cases that I've done with people, advised people, and then a lot of tactical things that work from that, and then modifying it suitably to our context. I've also put them in my videos. So that helps. My personal recommendation would be to not extend yourself or overextend yourself for more resources. This is absolutely more than enough. One more thing that is not covered here is that once you're on campus, once the buddy process starts, there'll be a huge stream of cases that will start flowing in from the buddies. Everyone shares their buddy cases with everyone else, or at least most people do that. So that's pretty helpful. So you will keep getting a flow of new cases, and typically buddies ask cases that they were asked before, or some they turn their live cases into small caselets for an interview perspective. So those are much more hands-on, and you will have a steady stream of cases. There's so many case books, you will have to put an end there, and I would say this much is enough. I personally am not a big fan of case in point, largely because they try to recommend you too many things without leaving a lot of scope for originality. At least that's my personal read on it. So I don't recommend that to everyone. And even if you don't look at that book, I think that's completely fine, and I would at least recommend that. So that's resources on case prep. And then it's about industry knowledge. This is so at least in the IIMs, the different clubs do share reports on industries, small primers. But my personal belief is that that's not required for any individual to go through in much detail. Because if you are really smart in your questioning, you can cover up whatever is required. It saves a lot of time if you don't actually go through 15-20 reports. So see how you are as a case solver, and see if you can actually ask good questions to get whatever input is missing. If you have that habit, if you are good at it, then you genuinely don't need to look at a lot of industries, because it also has a risk. It can make you tunnel vision in many ways. And I'll give you an example. I was doing a case some time back, which was about airport, that the government of India wants to establish a new airport, and they want your recommendation on where the location should be. And I asked, what's the objective of setting up that airport? And the objective was generating employment. Now, in this case, as the bad luck would have it, I have done an entire course on airport design in my undergrad because I was a civil engineer. And like 5-7 minutes of the case, I just started blasting off my knowledge. In the next 30 minutes, I went into all the possible parameters that go into deciding an airport location. Eventually, we boiled it down to like 3 to 5 picks. And then the interest asked me, how would you look at this? Which is that one factor you will look at. And I again started looking at geographical factors and climate and meteorological factors and all those things. And my friend just got fed up with me, and he said, dude, what's the objective? And the objective was generating employment. And in my technical knowledge and my paranoia to show it off, I completely dealing myself from the particulars of that case. So that's a risk if you like try to do too much of a PhD on a particular topic. So to cut a long story short, it's not required that much. But what you can do is, if there are 2 or 3 industries which definitely baffle you, you can just read about them a little bit more. Like, I knew that I was not very comfortable with some of the terms in the banking and the financial sector. So I read a little bit on that. And then pharma was again something that I felt that I was not completely in control of, because I've not done a lot of pharma cases. I've not read a lot of pharma industry literature. So I just read these 2 industries to cover up that area which I felt were really scary for me. So just do that. Now the next question is, can you do this alone? A lot of it, yes. And this is where I was starting at when I was mentioning in my first slide here that much of it can be done individually, and that's why I ask people to start early. Now, the few things you can do individually: casebook reading, watching the videos. So I should have added videos also. Videos, casebook reading, and listening to the look over my shoulder. These are absolutely individual. What you can also do is, and this is something which is very useful, is that give yourself guesstimates and unconventional problems and try to structure them and get a sense check if you can. And everything around you can be turned into a case, right? A guesstimate, especially, and an unconventional problem. Let me give an example. So you're probably watching this on YouTube. So the first guesstimate that comes to my mind is, how many people do you think are watching a YouTube video at whatever time you are looking at? How many people in the world are watching a YouTube video right now? Or how many YouTube videos get uploaded in a day? And this is just two examples from a viewer's perspective right now. You can pick up anything. How many laddus are eaten in a day? How many chapatis get made in India in a day? Or someone recently gave me a problem that, let's say, if we develop a coronavirus vaccine in India, let's say we have enough number of dosage, how much time will it take to actually inoculate everyone with the vaccine? So everywhere around every single object is a potential source of a guesstimate. Do that iteratively, give yourself guesstimate, estimate market sizes for anything and everything. Read which are the latest startups that are out there, which sector they play in, and just start estimating the market size for those startups if you want to have a more business flavor to it, though it's not required. And you will realize in like just 2 weeks, if you're doing this regularly, you will become so good at guesstimates. And then is unconventional problems. Give yourself any problem and pick out any newspaper, see any problem, and just figure out how you solve it. Crime. How do you reduce the number of robberies in Delhi? How do you reduce the number of murders in the country? How do you solve the problem of potholes in India? How do you solve the problem of annual flooding in Mumbai? So many possible situations that you can give to yourself. How do you increase farmers' income? How do you double? So any government policy that you look at can be a source of potential conventional problem. So pick out the government, just type government schemes. You will have a host list of government schemes which are solving a problem. Come up with your own structure to solve those. These two things, if you do guesstimates and unconventional problem on your own, you'll be unstoppable in terms of case solving. The last thing I want to leave you with here in this video is that keep all your notes in one place. So have a dedicated file or a dedicated folder for this and keep revisiting the feedback that you get from people. So that's largely it on the preparation front. Revisiting the feedback is absolutely crucial because you don't want to repeat the mistakes that you have, and eventually by the day of the interview you should be in a position that all the mistakes which need to be made have been made by building on your previous feedback. So that's on the preparation front. I just want to bust some myths around the case interview process that I saw, or some of the common questions that people have. Some of these I've already preempted and answered earlier, so I'll just quickly rush through this. First, a few baseless thoughts I think should be shunned. A lot of people spend their energy on, oh, how many numbers this company is going to hire, recruit. Don't spend your time on that because A, from what at least I have heard, that numbers not pre-decided. B, there's nothing you can do about it. You really have to be the best version of yourself. Thinking about this is not going to help one bit, and there's nothing you can do about it. If you What I have understood from the recruiters is that if you are good at an absolute level, you will make it. That's it. Certain educational backgrounds can be a source of weakness, and especially if I'm not good at mental math, I will not get through. Absolutely not. At least on IIM Ahmedabad campus, I've seen CAs, people with a fashion designing background, engineers, of course, economics, commerce, doctors, lawyers, all of them being shortlisted and converting interviews for consulting firms. Yes, you might not be very good at mental math. Okay, that's one weakness that you have. You can cover it up perhaps with a better structure, better communication skills. So do not assume that your background is a source of a make or break weakness. It might make you weak in certain aspects, but it cannot make you uniformly bad at case solving process, which is the next point. That few people are inherently significantly poor or better at case solving. I don't think so. It's just a process of discipline. I think what people are significantly reluctant to discipline their thought process and significantly pliant in wanting to do that. So that's about it. So don't be too harsh on yourself and don't judge yourself too soon. If you follow all the resources that I've shared in the previous slide, I'm sure this problem will not happen. Second is misdirected effort, especially in the context of the case group. Sometimes I find that people become a little greedy and they just want to be the interviewee. They want to practice more cases and not be the interviewer so much where they feel the learning is limited. Uh, I don't think so. I think when you take an alternative role, you build a lot of perspective. I think I learned more about case solving by being an interviewer than an interviewee, and that's essentially right from 2015 to 2018. 2015 when I graduated from YF and 2018 when I joined IIM Ahmedabad. In those 3 years, I hardly solved any cases in interview because I did not have an interview lined up. But I did workshops and I helped a lot of people. And that's where I truly built the knowledge base which was required to come up with all these videos on this channel. Because when I became the interviewer, I realized what kind of mistakes leave more negative impact and what are the kind of mistakes that seem like a make or break but are not. When your friend is silent for a minute, when you are silent for a minute in an interview, you might not feel that's a very long time. But when you are on the other side and you are an interviewer, that will feel like eternity. So some of the mistakes on which you are too kind or too harsh on yourself, that those blunt edges in your assessment will get smoothed out. That's why it's so important to actually be the interviewee, be the observer also upfront. This I've already talked about. This I've already talked about. And this is sometimes I think some people lose out focus on. They just do case solving and they forget about personal experience interviews. Sometimes that does get deprioritized even in the interview process, but you never know how much in detail an interviewer will go about your life. I have had interviews, in fact, most of my interviews on campus were where the cases were for a very short time and they were much longer discussions on who I was as a person. So what people and I'm not saying this is true for everyone, but some people, and I just want to preempt that risk that the viewer is not one of that person, is that they would just do all of this in the last couple of days. They will just leave all their HR, this is also the HR questions prep towards the end. I will advise you not to do that. And there's some practical pointers here which I'll cover in the next video in a lot of detail. But remember to start early here. That's it. Do not leave it to the last or second last day. It's very important also. And I think these are fundamentals that any session on case solving that you will have on campus or any video that you look at will cover. That the process matters more than the answer, but sometimes initially we believe that the answer matters more, so that's a myth. That time is not enough. It is if you structure your problem well, and that you have to keep speaking, and you cannot allow for breaks in your conversation. I don't think that's also very important. You take your break, take your thinking time, and this is all that I will also, you will listen to this particular input over and over again when if you look at my case preparation videos on this channel. And but the last thing I want to leave you with is that the belief that the role of luck can be eliminated. It cannot be. You can just get very lucky or very unlucky that day. So nothing you can do much about it, but I can promise you the sky won't fall if you don't convert a particular case interview. You will find a chance, at least in IIM Ahmedabad, you can get a chance in your final interview if you do well. And I've talked about how academics can help on that front. So that's just it. Do not forget to check out the case interview preparation videos on this channel. Uh, Make sure that you keep revisiting some of these ideas, especially when you're in the thick of your preparation process. Share this with others if you think they might benefit from this, and leave a comment if you want to share anything with me. Take care, best of luck, and just stay curious. Thank you.